Hey everybody, happy holidays to you. Happy everything, as we like to say around here. We're very excited that you've decided to join us for this webinar. We know that middle of December is always a crunch time, so if you're taking some time to talk to us, we appreciate it. It's a great topic as we look into the new year. We're going to talk about how to build a world-class SDR team. For the sake of this webinar, we're going to call it SDRs, but we know that people call them BDRs or MDRs or ADRs and any other DR that you can think of. So we are with you and we appreciate it, and we're just going to try and keep it simple today. As you know, with all Sales Hacker webinars, we are recording them, so feel free to, if you've got to step out, bookmark it. I know we will be sending this out to people afterwards and posting on the Sales Hacker website. Also, please, as questions come up, please ask them. We love to take questions live during a webinar. We want to make it very interactive with folks. Also, feel free to go into the chat feature and introduce yourselves, the name of your company, maybe how big your team is, something fun about you. You can also post it in the questions section as well. We'd love to just sort of get to know who our audience is and have you guys share information too. So with that being said, I want to go forward and really introduce our two guests. These are two people I've really been excited to talk to. I've done a ton of business in this space, and I know inside sales team very well. Of course, we know outreach very well, but I've never actually worked with outreach on anything, so I'm very, very excited about it. With inside sales team, we have Brian Vital. I hope I said that right, Brian. He is the VP of Growth of the InsideSalesTeam.com. He joined them about 4 years ago and has helped them scale from 15 to 45 people. And keep in mind, they're in a services business. There's kind of that outsourcing of an SDR team if you want to do that. And you can't do well and go from 15 to 45. So, Brian, congrats on that. I know you did a lot of coaching and training. So welcome for joining us. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Also, we have Steve Ross, who's the Director of Sales Development over at Outreach. He's managing about 40 SDRs and MDRs across the country in several offices. He's been with them for a year, which means he made the 25% club. So congratulations, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. Our pleasure. So let's start. Let's sort of give people some context of how we're going to go. We're going to talk about hiring first. We're going to talk about ramping, motivating reps. What do you do with those reps once they become sort of tenured? Scaling after motivation. And then, of course, what do you do with those top performers when you got a high-functioning team that's growing and going well? So what do you do to make sure that everybody keeps their skills sharp? So let's start at the beginning when you're building an SDR team. Gentlemen, what do you look for first in a candidate for an SDR? They're so often fresh out of college, first or second job, maybe a first sales job even. What are you looking for? Because you don't necessarily have a sales history to look at.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, for us, and we often will hire people right out of college or some of my best players haven't necessarily been any kind of sales background. What I look for when I'm looking at an interview or in the process is I first of all look for a strong mindset. And you might say, well, how do you do that? I think there are some things around like language patterns. How are they talking about themselves, their history? How do they think? Because to me, sales is a lot about mindset, especially on the SDR, MDR, DR side. It's about how do you approach your day-to-day. It can be an up-down grind each and every day. So you have to have a strong mindset. I look for that in an interview.
How do you define that? What does that mean when you say mindset? Because I agree with you, but that can mean so many to so many.
Yeah. So part of one of the things I always ask everybody is what's their drive? What drives them? And everybody's got something different. Some people it's money, some people it's family, some people it's like success. I looked for how do I describe that drive? I'm also looking for do they pack a punch when they answer a question? Are they coming in light or do they pack a punch? They really want to come and work at outreach. They really want to be an SDR. So I'm looking for that kind of just how do they describe their experiences. Mm-hmm. I'm also looking for, obviously, in sales, like how do you handle rejection? It's a big thing in the SDR world. And so I might push back it a couple times. I might see something on the resume and push there just to see how they react. They come back with a good, solid, concise answer, or do they dance around a little bit?
Can you give an example of that? Is there one you sort of go to when you're interviewing somebody?
Yeah, well, so I'll give you an example from yesterday. So there was a guy who had a couple years being an account executive, about 6 months or so. And he really wanted to be an SDR here at Outreach. And at one point I said, I don't believe that you really want to be an SDR. Like, you've already got this experience being an AE. It usually doesn't work out. I'll let it hang there for a minute, because I'm just kind of pushing a little bit early on to see how do they take that. Like, are you really just kind of coming in because you want to work at Outreach and you're looking for that next step, or are you able to come back with a really strong answer in terms of why you belong at our company?
Just out of curiosity, what kind of answer are you getting that signifies, okay, I'll take a shot on this? Because I agree, it oftentimes feels backwards for someone to go from AE to SDR, but I could also see it working out when it's a company like Outreach that's in high growth mode. Maybe the company they were with before wasn't able to get the traction they needed, right? There's always some level of circumstance. Right. What signals a positive outcome for you?
So to me, I think it would be, how quickly do you come back with an answer? And do you do it with like sort of a smile in your voice? Because that to me is like, I can take a punch, but I can come right back. Actually, I don't do it in a way that's overly aggressive. It's just assertive. It's confident, but it's like, I'm still in rapport with you. Like, you kind of gave me a little jab. I'm still in rapport with you. But I'm going to be, sorry about that. I'm going to be assertive right back. And I think it helps because, like, you're going to get that rejection on the phone. And so an interview is a good place to start.
Yeah, no, I agree. Brian, how about you? What are you sort of looking for?
Yeah, there's 4 things I look for, and we look for here at Inside Sales Team. And some are going to sound cliche, but I can explain exactly how you can look into it, and it's not perfect. So the first 2, prongs here or pillars is going to be intelligence and hard work. So we give everyone on our team, it's called an executive director cognitive test. So basically the thought is most of the time you're going to be speaking to directors and plus at companies, so you should be as smart as them, at least smart as half of them, hopefully. It gives you a percentile score on where you would rank with 100 directors. That's right. The first part, all right? And then hard work, everyone goes, well, everyone says they're hardworking. Nobody ever says, like, I'm not that hardworking, right? And so I'd ask you to look for when they were in college or their last job, are they doing multiple things at once? Because the best SDRs are always more hungry and doing more than just prospecting. They're learning coding on the side. They're intellectually curious. And so I always look for, like, all right, they not just sports, but they were in college and they also belonged to the newspaper and something else. So, like, they were doing multiple things at once. The second part is like coachability and confidence. And there's like, those are like oftentimes people see them as opposites, but it's not. And so I always ask people to prospect me anything they want. And usually it ends up being like sports tickets or a season ticket package or something like that.
It's not sell me this pin. You're not going to go through that.
No, it's a little, well, sometimes people aren't as passionate about markers or pens. So if you get someone who's sports oriented or maybe it's a charity, like, solicit a donation or something like that. But I asked them what to pitch me, right? And Steve said, quick. If they're quick with that smile on their face, they're confident. They're like, I'm ready to do this. And then what I always do, even if someone nails it, I'll always give like a little bit of constructive criticism and see how they respond.
That's great.
And if they respond well to it, then I know they can be coachable because I love confidence, but you have to be able to learn, from someone who's been doing this for a long time, if it's not our CEO or someone else at the company. So those 4, and again, it's not always perfect, and nobody goes 100%. I haven't. I'll say I haven't. If you have, Steve or Richard or anyone else out there, congrats to you, but it's worked pretty well for us, so that's what we do.
That's great.
I think I also would say that I like to do, or at least look for, is do they close at the end of a meeting? Now, they're not in a closing role, but do they ask me, like, what's the next step in the process? They ask me, do I have the job? That's important to me. Now, I would maybe 20%, 25% that might actually ask that question, but that to me is like somebody that is like instinctively knows what to do, or if they've had some experience, they're applying that right in the interview, and that's what they're going to be doing all day.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I do think SDRs and BDRs, I think they are closing. They're closing that meeting. There's an ask and there's a get there, right? One of my favorite things to do. So if there's any SDRs who are listening, who want to figure out a great question, always ask the person who's hiring. Ask them this one question, which is, "Hey, what have I said today that would prevent you from making me the offer right now?" And it's a very high level question. Directors and VPs don't even expect that question, particularly from an SDR candidate. They don't even expect it from a sales rep candidate, as far as I'm concerned. So it's a great question. So if you're out there looking, and you're looking to start the new year, that's a good closing question for yourself.
It will stand
What about
out.
red flags? What are the red flags you're looking for, right? What concerns you?
Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Okay, yeah, I'll start. It really, for red flags for me, it could just vary. Like a lot of it is like instinct and some of the stuff I explained. But the one thing I would say is, again, you're thinking about a general sum. So just take your whole pool of candidates you might hire for a year. Everyone that has done great things here at Inside Sales Team has had, if you put them in a room of 20 people, they would have some type of presence. And it doesn't always need to be the life of the party. It doesn't always need to be the person that's obnoxiously loud. It's that they have a presence, because when they get on the phone, that presence in person also translates to the phone. And then, of course, I'm already doing it. You lose this on the phone. And so if they don't have a presence in person, it probably means they won't have much of a presence on the phone. And so that's one red flag. Or if I meet someone and I leave the interview and I was bored during the interview, or I wasn't excited to meet them again, it's just I'm feeling a little bit of hesitation there.
Got it. That's great. How about you, Steve? What are your red flags?
Yeah, for me, it's a couple of things. One would be, are they trying to interview for the job they don't have yet? For example, a path for SDRs, one of them is an account executive. If you come in and you actually start kind of interviewing for that next role, it would be a red flag for me. The other thing, in interview questions, is they're using a lot of we language. So if I say, give me an example where you've been persistent, and I hear, well, we did X, we did Y, we did Z at my last company or in my last role, I feel like that might not be you doing that persistence. And it happens. You'll hear, we did this. I'm looking for what did I do? And I'll dig in there if I get that we language. Okay, what was your responsibility within that? It doesn't matter whether they're working at a restaurant or a sales gig. It's what did you contribute? Mm-hmm. And if I'm not hearing that, I do have some hesitation.
That's great.
Yeah, it's one of the only times where you don't want to hear the we. As a team, when you join your company, you want to hear the we, right? You hear sports stars saying so you kind of get this feeling. But I agree with Steve. I want to hear how you directly hit your number. Tell me how you did it, not how we did it or we didn't do it. Why didn't you do it and why did you do it? So I think that's really valuable. You don't hear that. I want the I answer in that situation.
I tell people to ask, what did you learn by not hitting your goal? Right. And if they can walk away with something they've learned, I think that goes back, Brian, to what you were saying too, which is, are they coachable? Right. If they can say, hey, I foobarred this and here's what I worked on and here's what I figured out, that it helps eliminate that red flag. And if they can't answer that question, and they start to blame everybody and they start the finger pointing and the excuse factory goes into overdrive and overtime, then, that's the big red flag. Let's move forward on the next topic. Right. So, and again, Brian, I know you're up in Buffalo, New York, right?
Yeah.
Right. And Steve, where are you located?
Seattle.
You're in Seattle. So tough job markets, right? So I'm in the Bay Area, right? We hear it all the time. These folks aren't going to sit around a long time. The average tenure is 14 months. It takes 3 months to ramp them. You got, another 3 months because once they hit 6 months, they're going to start hearing offers from recruiters, right? So, what do you do in this tough job market? And Brian, I don't know if you have that issue in Buffalo or Steve, I think you do in Seattle, but how do you do that? A little bit. All right. So Steve, how do you, since you have a little bit, how do you handle that? What do you do?
You have to hunt a little bit. And what I mean by that is you might need to do some outbounding via LinkedIn. You might need to have some conversations with people in roles that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like you're out shopping somewhere and you have a great experience buying shoes. That could be somebody you could talk to that, based on our package, our income potential, could be very attractive to somebody who's in a different role, but has that hunger, that drive, is customer friendly, all the things that you'd look for. Certainly, reaching out via LinkedIn in a outbounding campaign. I think more than anything, though, so there's a tactical piece, which would be those items. I think it's really important to stick to your values. And why it's important is you can certainly go and grab somebody, put them in the seat, and I'm sure they can do the job. But if you start to waver on what's important to you in your organization, it's going to bite you later on, tough market or great market. And so being patient, but going out to the market to see if you can't draw somebody in.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of follow-ups on that, Steve. So first of all, does that mean if you have an empty seat to leave it empty till you find the right person, or do you go 50, you find that person who's, well, I'm not sure, and I'd rather have somebody there than not have somebody there? You know, what is your approach on that?
So I think you don't make a big bet. That's what I think you don't do, first of all. Because my experience is if you make a big bet, you could really lose, and it costs you that 3 months, costs you that seat, and you may or may not have hit your number anyway.
Right.
And so, often it is better to just stick to your what do you really value in your team member and the organization, because it can become a cancer.
Yep.
Just putting somebody in a chair can become a cancer, and you're like, okay, I got my X number of sales or whatever you're looking for.
Yep.
But
so,
people might be leaving because they don't like sitting next to that person. Now I got 2 seats open.
Right. So your thought is to leave it empty rather than hire the wrong person.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. I would agree with you 100%, because it's about, even a bad SDR hire for 30 or 60 days is still about a $12,000 loss, just based on their salary, your salary, timing, all that lost time. No, that's all right. So I completely agree with you. That's what you need to think about. Brian, how about you? What do you guys do? Do you have a tough market in Buffalo, or you work for companies who have or are coming from a tough market? So you like that. You like that people in San Francisco can't hire those people, right?
Yeah, a little bit. No, but I mean, more so it's like it's a different tough market. It's like you search sales development in Buffalo, there's very limited jobs. And so the market is tough in a different way, where you have to explain to salespeople, not always, but some salespeople, that, hey, like, sales development is not this job that is seen by some as lesser than account executives. It's actually a job that can be quite beneficial to some. And the way I would explain it to someone is, number one, the opportunity. So the opportunity to make the money you can with inside sales team is oftentimes much more than account executives in Buffalo. But the second is the control of pay. And so when I went from SDR and now I did more of account executive in the last year, it's interesting. And what I mean by that is, when I was an SDR, if I was about to go on vacation, I could send out 50 more LinkedIn messages and probably get a meeting. Yep. And that control of pay is a luxury that, like, you don't realize what you have until it's gone. And really great SDRs can truly define their pay on a monthly basis. So, some account executives will argue with me, the best ones in the world, I'm sure you can do it monthly, but oftentimes it can be quarterly, yearly control of pay on account executive level. An SDR can control their pay weekly, even daily in some cases. And that luxury is something I talk to new hires about. Like, hey, I know you don't know sales development, but what if you can control your pay every single day? How's that sound? It's a little bit different, but yeah, so.
No, that's good. I've never thought about it. I think that's brilliant. That's a really good idea. So what, question coming from the audience, thank you for asking, is, what about the college job fairs, the career fairs, right? You're going to go up against, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, right? We all know that booth from when we were in college. I assume they still do that. Do you do the career fairs at the colleges?
I haven't had a lot of success, Brian. I'm not sure if you have. I think that we have had success in finding a college grad and then getting referrals from that. Once they're on board and they're performing, they usually know a lot of people that might be interested as well. I haven't found the career fairs to be very fruitful myself.
Got it.
Yeah, me neither. I haven't had a ton of success with those. I've had more success with job fairs in itself. I think for someone to be hungry and go to a job fair, even if they have a job or not, and make that time, I've had really good success. Where oftentimes at the career fairs at college level, I talk to the people that are there, and they often just tell me that they're there because their career advisor or guidance counselor told them they had to be there. So, like, that drive and everything we talked about in regards to what you look for is kind of lost. Like, they're just there because they had to be. For instance, like, I don't want someone to make $75 a day because they have to. I want someone to make $150 because they want to, and that's, like, already setting up the bad tone. So
yeah, we had a couple of people chiming in from the audience saying they have the same experience at job fairs. It's just not the right thing. There's only about, and someone could check me on this, is that I think there's only about 150 colleges that even offer a degree in sales. Like, it's not an offered degree. So if you happen to be near one of those colleges, then maybe I'd consider trying it once. But even then, it's different and it's difficult. question, have you ever noticed a certain type of education background coming from the audience that does align with sales? Is it marketing? Is it business? Is it engineering? Is it, just a general liberal arts who they don't know what they want to be yet? Like anything that you're looking for specific in their education background?
I'll tell you an odd one where I've had some success. Education. Yeah, right?
Yep.
I got an SDR manager who was a teacher, one of my top performers, teacher, and we're talking to somebody now who had went to school for education. I think there's some sort of like people wanting to teach, having that natural curiosity we talk about, all of those elements. It's not something that just jumps off the page at you.
Okay. Great. Well, let's go ahead and move forward. I know there's a couple other questions coming in, so we might hang on to them and try and get them answered later. But I want to make sure we get through all the different topics. But I know this is a really hot one for folks. This is an interesting one that's come up a couple times in conversations for me. Background checks, right? Particularly when you're hiring SDRs, you are hiring kids who are early in their career. People make mistakes in their life. Granted, there are certain things I probably wouldn't hire, but do you guys do are you allowed, you may not be allowed to talk about it. Do you do background checks? Are there things that you look for in terms of, that's not a big deal as long as this person can prove to me that they're not a total, fuck up? Like, does that ever come up for you?
Do you want to go or?
Yeah, I mean, it's an HR function for us. I mean, we do them as a final background check. We're looking for the serious stuff. To me, it's a, if we feel like the person's a good fit, can do the job, the background check's the last step. We got some compliance things that we need to pay attention to. But that normally is all handled in our HR function.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, it's same for us. We set up a benchmark or whatever you want to call it, a standard, and if someone unfortunately is below or above that, we make that decision. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I didn't just work for inside sales team. I worked for when I was an SDR with Discover Org inside sales team, and everyone here has two brands that they are responsible for. I'm not saying someone who fails a background check can't be the best employee in the world, but it's one of those things where in a services industry where we represent our client to a profile on LinkedIn, we set up a standard and we expect candidates to pass that standard when it comes to background checks.
Yeah, and I think I'm talking about, look, if someone was 21 years old and they got a DUI and they've they've stayed out of trouble since then, I'm willing to take a risk on that person. If they punched somebody and got into an assault situation or something with a significant other, I'd probably be a little more leery. So, and of course, bank robbers, we won't hire them either. So
nope, no bank robbers here.
But I appreciate it. I appreciate your candidness on it, and I think it's something people have to consider and they're afraid to talk about. So I appreciate you guys sharing what you can. So let's move on sort of the next thing about ramping, right? So we've hired people. Now we got to ramp them. My biggest questions for you are, what are your best practices and what are the biggest mistakes you've made in trying to ramp people, right? So Brian, maybe we'll go ahead and start with you on that one. Sure.
I take every part of the tech stack except probably the CRM as a luxury, except the phone. Like, I'm a phone guy. So so I think that the biggest mistake I made is I gave too many tools and too many functions to an SDR too early in ramp up. I believe that if an SDR can't utilize the phone and have some success, then the rest of it would be even more difficult to embrace more technology and still do well. So for us, best practice is like you start with the phone being your best friend before you get LinkedIn Navigator, before you may get other tools. So it's one of those things where, like, have an SDR, which is part of the job, prove it to you, be successful before you give them a $4,000 tech stack or something like that.
Right. How about you, Steve?
A little bit different philosophy. I do like it. Get them on the phone, get them going. 100% agree there. Obviously, like, one of our tools is outreach, and I think that does allow us to onboard.
Imagine that. Shocker.
Yeah. Never thought that was coming up, right? So what's great about outreach in ramping people is, like, they can literally be productive day one. In our boot camp, we actually have them start sequencing people so that when they're day one on the phone, they have people to call. There's not a lot of guesswork because we kind of show them how to do it. We get them accounts. So it's like when they come in, they've got the accounts. We have sort of upgraded our tech stack. So we've got your technology partner. We've got organization navigation partner. And so we kind of set them up, and we actually have them in a way where we kind of tell them how to approach an account, which is nice. Because now you come in, and to me, that's where I can actually get you on the phone, because we take care of a lot of the minutia up front and the things that take a lot of time for a rep to come in cold and build, that we can focus them on actually starting and getting outbound, and then build that muscle from day one instead of working on it in month one.
Yep. So I'd love to learn a little bit more, Brian, because, the thing that I've always run into is that, and I love everybody like Outreach, right? I love the stack and I love everything that we've got. But I also feel like sometimes we've spent so much time working to get people into a conversation, we aren't spending enough time teaching them how to have a good conversation, right? Yeah. Which should be a big part of ramping. Depending on what your reps are trying to do, like, at InsideSales.com, I know that your team actually, they can do everything from SDR to closing, right? And Steve, I know with your team, it is setting that appointment to doing some of that conversational stuff, but in many cases, the people using your tool are just trying to set appointments, so they may not have to have as many conversations. It can be more email oriented. But I'm curious to each of you, how do you coach them early on, right? Early, they're a week in, 2 weeks in. How do you coach them to have good conversations? Because for me, that's what it still comes down to.
Yeah, I'll start it. It starts with training on understanding of what a good fit is. And as they're working on the messaging, and that's a lot of role playing. I have them call typically our CEO's cell phone even, and practice like that. Some people can talk to me because maybe I was involved with them on the interview process and they have a level of comfort. But to call our CEO, where maybe they have not spoken before, and see how they can talk with the nerves is a big thing. But also, when it comes to the good conversation, good fit. But also when someone's working on their craft, right? Maybe someone we talked about out of college. I'm not ready to give them let's call it rank A accounts. And so we have a series of data that is good fit. So we're not going to set them up for failure. But let's just say they've been called a few more times than the other stuff. And so as they're working on their messaging, I'm not putting them in the batting cage against Pedro Martinez. I'm putting them on a tee in practice. And if you mess up, nobody converted on these accounts, so it's okay. And then I can keep learning with them. And I always say to people when they first start here, when they're first writing something, when they first get any kind of conversation, just write down yes or no and why and what happened. And then having those live kind of transcripts of what happened on those conversations. As a manager and trainer, you can really learn a lot from those. So I ask them to do that as well. We keep working on it. And once they're hitting fastballs, curveballs, sliders, and even knuckleballs, they get their A accounts. Yeah. So
got it. So we're getting blown up with questions, by the way. You keep seeing me look up. I'm looking at all these great questions coming along. So I'd like to dive into a couple of them if we can. So because we did ask the audience to do that. Couple of questions. How long is an appropriate time to shadow and work on their pitch before you actually have them hitting the phones?
12 minutes. Yeah, we like to get going quick. I kid around, but we do kind of the same thing in terms of what Brian said in our boot camp. We do, we actually call it a grinder. Credit goes to my manager, Jordan Greaser, for coming up with it, but it's a tournament, which ends up you have to call Matt Millen, our Senior Vice President of Revenue Operations. And so, do we allow people to shout? Sure we do, but for us, it's just get the reps in. Just go right away. And so we put them, like I said, we put them in sequence and just go. You can't do that much damage going to, what Brian said, that maybe touched more than once account at maybe a lower level of an individual, because you're only going to learn so much sitting next to somebody. And we certainly let people coach and listen to what other people are saying, but get up to bat.
Yeah, 100%. I would agree to that too. And it's one of those things where shadow is great, but it's a term that everyone talks about. But have you ever sat with someone shadowing? There are times when you can go an hour or two without someone even getting on the phone. And so, yeah, you can sit with your SDR for 7 hours and your lack of attention will be there. Or like what I rather do is like I know certain personas and what they're probably going to say, and there's no way I can teach every objection possible, but I'd rather role play for an hour or two than listen to someone for 20 hours and maybe hear them have 15 conversations. So I think it's a lot of more role playing and like being ready in a situation and tactical stuff, and then getting the at-bats and like Steve said. But everyone always says shadowing, but like I've never seen someone sit with someone and hear. I mean, you want to hear 5 conversations? Sit with them for 3 hours.
Yeah. And usually you're going to put him with a top performer who probably doesn't want to, sit with the guy because the gal is slowing him down.
Yeah,
Right.
I've yet to find shadowing be super effective because what ends up happening is there's never an actual live call that occurs.
Yeah, you don't get any.
Right. So if I'm going to do any kind of shadowing, I'm hoping I've got a device that maybe has recorded some calls legally and letting them listen to good calls. So I think shadowing can be a massive time suck unless you are guaranteed there's going to be a conversation.
Yep.
This is a great question, and we're not going to say who said it because it could have some HR issues. But is there ever an age where someone ages out to be an SDR? They're too old to be an SDR.
No.
Nope.
Yep.
Nope.
I agree. Yeah. What are some examples you guys have seen?
So I've had all age ranges. I think it comes down to like desire, hunger. Again, I don't think it matters. I really don't. I've got a full range here. I'm sure, Brian, you got a full range on your career. You've had in your
100%.
history, but like that absolutely not.
Yep.
Yeah, I would just say shame on the person that doesn't want to hire me when I'm 105.
Correct.
I promise you, I'm still going to be okay at it.
Still
At
be
that point.
killing.
Yeah, I call them lifers, right? There are people. Look, I'm a Gen Xer. I'm 48 years old. I've met many people who are just like me, and for whatever it is, maybe they've been super successful and they just don't want to stop working. Maybe they've got a family issue. Maybe they've got an elderly parent and they need to be able to work from home,
100%. Yeah.
take care of somebody, and they don't want to carry the burden of a full carrying the bag type role. The great thing about people like that too is that when they're good and you find them, one, they're very loyal. You don't have to coach them a lot. They tend to be coachable, but they know how to pick up the phone and call either of your CEOs. They've been doing it for 20 years, right? Like they've got their shtick down, right? So I would absolutely consider that candidate. And for me, some of those are the best remote candidates possible if you're looking to hire remotely as well, because you can find those people everywhere. And the technology exists that you can make sure that they're actually doing their job, not in a micromanaging way, but just in the like, are they getting their job done kind of way.
Right.
So that's great. One more question from the audience, then we'll move on to some other stuff because this is a good one. The did I catch you at a good time question. Someone picks up the phone. Do you want your SDRs, BDRs ever saying that on a cold call?
I'll start. I don't ask that question, but there's like a few parts of coaching to it. So what I recommend, especially newer SDRs to the game, to have more level of like comfort is I don't like the 15-second thing. I think it's cheap. I think if you ask someone for 15 seconds of their time, it's cheap, and you'll get a cheap listening back. I ask when the filmer's first starting, do you have a few more minutes to talk today? Therefore, when someone says yes, right, someone says yes to that question, you better get that meeting, right, because you're getting a few minutes to talk about a product cold. If someone says no to that question, which we do ask when the field starting here, then you have a strong follow-up, and you should really pin down another time to call that person back. And even some of our reps have started to send like 2 or 3 minute mini invites for that callback, because especially when you're dealing with certain high-level personas, they may say call me back at 4:30 when things slow down, but like they're going to forget about you. So like even sending out like a 2-minute mini invite when they say call me back at 4:30, that will snowball. And so I don't say it's a good time to catch you because it never is. I just say do you have a few more minutes to talk today. And if it's a yes, you get the meeting. If it's no, you start building these follow-ups and callbacks to convert on.
How about you, Steve? What do you guys coach on that?
Same thing. Our audience is, and maybe it's audience, because our audience is typically VPs of sales. They want you to get right to the point. We have used, have it cut you to bad time, have it cut you a halfway decent time. But I think that for the most part, a sales VP just wants you to get after it and not worry too much about the chit chat.
Yep.
They're busy.
So here's what I would say. I would say never ask that question. Come up with a new pattern interrupt. Go Google that, which is to freak people out. But keep in mind, people will find time if you give them a compelling reason to. asking them if they have time is not a compelling reason. So you need to find a way to get it across smoothly, effectively, efficiently, without sounding like a salesperson, right? And talk about value as quickly as possible. So there's a lot of ways to do that, which we could have a whole other webinar on. But you know, my advice is I tell people never to ask that question, and I teach them to do different pattern interrupts to break through the cycle. So,
Richard, I have a question for you. Do you think that's different across personas, or do you think that's the same for everything?
same for everything. Because here's why. I guarantee you guys are all in sales. And if someone calls you and they go, "Hi, Brian, this is Richard. I'm calling from," I know that in your gut, you're having a visceral response of, "OS, I picked up the phone for this guy. I thought it was somebody else." So your first emotional reaction is massively negative. Now, as a sales leader, you probably may give them the benefit of the doubt because that's our job. But, you know, I don't want that negative emotion. I want to keep that wall from being built because I already know it's going to be built. So that's what I do. So I teach them to say, "Hey, Brian, I know you weren't expecting my call. We're helping so-and-so and so-and-so do X. And I want you, and then I want you to say, I'm sorry, what did you say? Oh, well, great. I get to repeat my value prop." Or you're going to say, "Who are you?" Which is also, "What did you say?" And I'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry. This is Richard. We're helping companies do X." Now you've heard my value prop twice in about 15 seconds. So that's a pattern interrupt. I'm interrupting the pattern of people expecting, "Hi, this is Richard. I'm your time life operator."
Yeah,
so
sorry, go ahead.
Hey, go ahead. So that's what I teach around it. But and from my experience in people that because the people I teach they're selling to marketers, they're selling to heads of sales, they're selling to C-levels, CIOs, CTOs, IT people. None of those people want to hear bullshit, frankly. Right. They just don't. Just get to the point.
Yeah, we have something called a mini value add. So before you say, "Do you have a few more minutes to talk today?" It's like, "Hey, Richard, this is Brian Vital from," let's just say, XYZ. We're helping someone like yourself expand the reach of Sales Hacker. Like, there's a mini value add. So therefore, if they do say yes, it's a more open ear. Yep. I think what I'm saying is a few more minutes. I think what you're also saying is getting that person to say, "Wait, what'd you say?" Because like it's a mini value add before. So yeah, I think either way, as long as you come to bat with some type of value with the persona you're calling right away, I think the rest will work naturally. So I think that was actually pretty unique what you said, Richard. So thanks.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'm happy to answer questions. I got a lot of knowledge in my head. I don't know if it's good.
It was good.
Let's move from ramping, right? We kind of moved on from ramping to motivating, right? So what do you guys do to motivate your team? We know the average tenure is 14 months. You may have different experiences, which is, I think, would speak highly to the organizations you've built versus the industry standard. But what do you do to motivate your SDRs on a regular basis?
I can start on this one. We do a couple things. One, I feel like we have the best-in-class compensation plan. And for us, top of funnel is so important. I think it's for every company. And, for us to have a plan that is really attractive is number one. Two, keep it fresh. And what I mean by that is like incentives or contests or just something that like people aren't expecting, but it's engaging. And we'll do the team will actually pull together their own sort of stuff sometimes. They'll get teams together, they'll do partners or something like that where it's just.
What do they do? How are they self-motivating? Can you remember one?
Yeah, they'll do like a contest where, it'll be activities, meetings, and sales. And so, you might get a point for 20 calls or something like that. You might get 2 points for a meeting booked, and then a lot of times what they'll do, if they get a sales accepted lead, it allows them to take points from somebody else. So it's competitive, but it kind of keeps it fresh.
I like that.
And we'll keep scoring on a whiteboard or on the window back here. Right. But that way it's sort of they're picking the contest. We'll throw something out there. Cash contest, we do that. But it's just something to keep the flavor going.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Do your managers have a certain amount of contest cash for each week so that, they can dole out $300 or $400 and however they want to do it every week, or is it a little more structured?
It's a little more structured because we have teams, geographically displaced across the country. So we meet about it each week. I have a captain on the manager team that's sort of in charge of making sure that we don't forget about it. maybe soliciting feedback from some of the team members of like, hey, what would be really exciting. We keep it top of mind like each week, and we'll actually say, okay, this is what we want to do team-wide. And the managers will do like within their own unit, like, whoever gets the most meetings, say, I'll take out to lunch tomorrow. We had 2 of our managers here that if they hit a certain goal, they made them pancakes and sausages the next morning.
Oh, wow.
So they came in with the apron, they did the whole thing, and the whole group came in. It's fun. It was just like a good, like, cultural fun thing that wasn't expected, but it helped.
Yep. So that's great. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I haven't heard that term, keep it fresh, Steve, but I love that. And yeah, we do the same thing. We have someone, part of his role here in Title is like that's his responsibility, is to create innovative games and motivational promotion. So one thing I would say to anyone listening is like, don't just say tomorrow, all right, hey, the most person does the most completes in 6 months gets this, or most SDLs in 6 months gets this. Really think about like short-term, like hour-by-hour initiatives that you'd like for your team to get done, and then you should coach and motivate and promote around that. Oftentimes in my own sales experience, I've been part of contests that like, it's one of those things where like, oh, that sounds great, and hopefully I get it in 6 months from now, but like I can't, people lose kind of focus. It needs to be almost activity-based, like Steve said, or even schedule meeting-based, but once you start going far down that sales funnel, it kind of gets more and more or less controlling for the SDR, so they kind of lose faith. Also, motivation is like, I've struggled with this a lot of times. I've been successful in my opinion sometimes, but there's always going to be some other company that's going to say something enough to one of your SDRs to try to pry them away from you. And so what do you have? Well, what you have is your relationship with that person. And so what I really try to do is to find a really great line between a friend and a manager. And so it's not easy. It's super challenging, but I think some of the best SDRs we've had here have been here for 3-4 years. And those are the same SDRs and friends that have been at my wedding and people that are really close to me. And I've built a level of trust and faith with them that, hey, if things are not working well, like they'll come to me and we'll correct them together and be just like a team. So I think it's one of those things where like the one thing you do have over everyone else that's prying after 14 months, or whatever reason it is you've got that relationship, and how you treat that is your own doing.
Yeah, I think being approachable is the key factor, right? And I'm glad to hear you say that you're spending some of that quality time getting to know that person, right? You can, as a manager, you can take 2 or 3 people to lunch, every other week. And again, you may talk about business, you may talk about personal, but they're going to remember that you took them to lunch, right? They may or may not remember. They probably will even remember what you talked about, but they're going to remember the fact that you took time with them more than anything. And it's a lot like I've got 2 kids, and I know that the thing that they value most is spending time with me. And, they hate it when we don't get to do reading at night, because that's just their time to just chill with dad, right? It's the same kind of thing. So it doesn't always have to be compensation. It's attention, right? And I think rewards matter, but I think recognition matters too. Steve, I want to come back to you, because everybody will say this, that they've got best-in-class compensation, right? Without, telling us what you're paying everybody, what are the components of a best-in-class compensation piece in your mind?
Sure. So we do the primary part that we pay on is a sales accepted lead, or a SAL. And the reason for that is it is the closest to what the SDR can control, but still have a quality metric. And so we don't necessarily pay on meetings or activities or anything like that, because that can tend to get sideways. And we don't pay too much on the back end, because once it goes in the pipeline as an SDR, I don't have a lot of control on that. We do a tier system where the higher you go, the more you get paid, which I think is very common. We do a lot of retro stuff, and so once you hit a next step, all your sales get retroed at the higher number. We don't do some will do like a gap where, let's say, we 10 to 12 is going to be an extra $50, but it'll land those 2.
Right.
We pay the whole thing back.
I like that.
And so that way you're not just, oh great, I got couple $100, but I did all this additional work, and it's always above and beyond quota.
Who defines the sales accepted lead? The sales rep, or does it meet a certain criteria?
So it meets a certain criteria.
Okay, so that's the thing I see a lot, is that the sales reps don't want to accept the lead because they don't want to be held accountable for that lead, because it may not close this month, this quarter, this week, whatever, or whatever personal reason they may have. So
Right.
I'm always cautious of that. So I'm glad to hear that you have a minimum criteria that if
Right.
it meets, then that automatically becomes a sales accepted lead.
Yeah, there's some just like there's some you read the pitch a little bit. Because we need like a next step. We need to make sure that everyone's on the same page as it relates to the value that we provide. Because we don't want dirty deals in the pipeline either. But it's a clean set of like 6 criteria that we weigh against.
Yep. That's great. All right. Well, let's move on to the next topic because we got 2 more to go, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions. So, and then I want to come back to the questions because I mean, literally, I'm blowing up over here. Like we could do a whole nother 2 hours on the questions being asked. So, thank you to the audience.
Great.
Scaling, right? When do you start to plan for scale, right? And again, Brian, you went through that. Even though you're an outsource agency, an inside sales team. But, you know, you've got a plan for scale. Steve, you've got a different approach to scaling, I think, because you are the actual vendor of choice. So I'd love to hear from each of you on how you guys look at scaling.
Yeah, I can start this one. And obviously, yeah, it is dictated by the client a lot of the times. But you guys, we talked about earlier, like this open chair. Like, do you hire if there's just an open desk or an open chair? And I think the same goes with management and structure. So when do you start planning for scaling? You don't do that until your core, your structure, your management team is strong enough to embrace that and take that on. And if you're not, then you don't scale yet, and you find stronger pieces of the core or the structure of the team. So, you know, sometimes for us, even a customer may say, hey, we want to go up to 10 people from 5. Like, we don't always say yes. Like, if we don't feel like we have a strong team lead or someone that can help us get from 5 to 10, then we might say, hey, like, let's start with just getting a strong 6 onto the team. And so I think that it's important to have the structure before you scale, because then it could be even worse than it is at 5 or the smaller number. So
I agree. Steve, how about you on your side?
Yeah, so we really started to scale this year. I came into a pretty fortunate situation where the foundation was already built before I got here. And what I've been doing over the last year is scaling it out a little bit. To me, I think a couple of things for us. Grooming your folks. So what I'm going to be doing is layering in layers of management as we continue to grow. And part of that is taking people that are interested in, say, a management track and starting to groom them early, right? Getting them involved in like some decision making, even if it's not like a big decision, but like getting their input, getting how they think. So that when I open up, say, a team lead position, I've got internal candidates that I can go to right away. I think there's also just the management layer, like what Brian was talking about. You got to be ready. And I think that's also grooming the management layer and getting everybody to think bigger. We were very startup mode this time last year, and we progressed out of that to where we're really thinking. I think our management team is getting really tight in terms of how do we take the next step, and so they want to take the next step professionally, and then I'm going to backfill their positions as we get bigger. Hopefully with internal candidates who already know our product, already know our company, already passionate about it. And we've been working with those folks over time.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. I'm gonna scoop on to the next one, and we're gonna sort of move into the lightning round. So I'm gonna ask everybody to go quick, right? Maybe I'll put up a little clock for 30 seconds because I know there's a ton of questions. The last question coming from me for the team is: so you've got great SDRs, you got top performers. How do you keep those folks motivated, right? Those men and women, they're crushing it all the time. What are you doing? How are you keeping them motivated? So
I can start with that. I think a couple of things. Again, compensation makes a lot of sense. But for us, what I found with a lot of our top performers, they want to get involved. And that doesn't necessarily mean they want to manage a team, right? But they want to have impact on the unit as a whole. And I love it because they know it more than I do. They're on the front lines, they're on the calls every day. They know what the pulse of the team is. They know what's making people happy or not happy. And I think getting that involvement, whether it's with the team, exposure to like senior management, like I can't tell you how valuable people find coffee with our CEO. It might be 15 minutes. But hey, one of my SDRs went and played cards with our VP. Like that alone is like it's a recognition thing again. I think that is huge. Certainly career path would be another piece. Where do they want to go, and helping them get there. You're giving them some guidance and direction on how do you make that next step, whatever it might be.
Do you guys do that sort of SDR1, SDR2, SDR3, the micro promotions if they hit certain goals along the way?
Yeah, we got 2 layers right now.
Okay. How about you, Brian? How do you guys keep that top team going?
Yeah. So when I first took over the floor as like director of sales development, when certain shifts of a growing company, right, we have 15 to 45, a lot of changes, a lot of directional changes. I felt myself gravitating towards the newest hires to explain to them what was going on with the company. And I realized that was a huge mistake. And so as time goes on, even if someone's hitting quota and they're seemingly happy, it should almost be it's not opposite, but like, don't forget that just because someone's hitting quota and you think they're making good money and they seem to be happy, again, transparency, overall company direction, ask them how they're doing. Hey, I'm old school, but like manners still go a long way. Say thank you to top performers from time to time because they're making your life easier. And so and it's not about like, I try to make every person that works here in the sales team like they were just that brand new person we just brought in, that prized hire. Because at one point they were, and they should always be if they're performing hitting quota for you on your team.
That's great. All right. Well, let's go to a lightning round from questions from the audience, and we'll see how many of these we get through. Christina wants to know, Brian, which executive director cognitive test do you give?
It's a test called from the Omnia group.
Okay, from the Omnia group. And do you give that test pre or post an interview?
Post initial interview.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Next question. That was too broad, I think. College career fairs we did. What's your go-to question to decide if you're going to hire somebody or not? Do you have that one question? Either one of you.
I don't know if I have one question.
What are two of them?
So one I have is I just like to ask someone, again, the motivation thing you said, Steve, and that can be in many different forms, but I just sometimes ask like why are you here today?
Yeah.
I want to hear their answer. Like, why are you here? Like, why do you want to be an SDR? Like, why do you want to work with inside sales team? Like, it's just, you can get a lot out of that question.
I ask everybody what drives them. I don't know if that's the deciding factor, but I like knowing how one thinks.
Great. I'm just trying to go through these questions. Sorry. How do you manage your SDRs, right? Because there is so much to do. That it is a position, depending on how you do it, that's, there's a lot of KPIs and metrics that are involved. There's a lot of personality. There's entitlement factors. And let's be honest, it ain't just the millennials who think they're entitled anymore. Everybody does, just so you know. What are some of those things that you guys have used to help, that you've learned in terms of managing?
Steve, you want to start?
Yeah, great question. The KPIs are important. We track 2 religiously, which are dials and people in sequence, because that shows us the health of how you're going to do, a leading indicator. And then as far as like meetings booked, that's going to also show us, are you on track or not? And we're public, like everything's out there. I think that's every sales floor, making sure that everybody knows what's going on. But I think hands-on coaching, training, managing daily, you have to in an SDR shop.
So that daily piece is really important for you.
Yeah. A couple of my managers do either a daily or a biweekly huddle. Get the whole team. It's a hands-on job. It's not a set it and forget it kind of role. You have to sort of be in there.
Yeah. I always coach managers that you should walk around and say hello to everybody on the floor. When you run a team, even if it's 40 people, you should walk around every morning and just say good morning to everybody. Try and make a second of eye contact, right? And tell them you're doing it because you know how busy it is. You know how tough it is for them to be there without their manager all the time, but you at least want to acknowledge their existence and presence, right? So that's one thing I do. How about you, Brian? What are some of the things you do? Because you guys have multiple groups of people.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to managing, I think I agree with Steve 100%. The KPIs on dials and sequences is huge, like the first 6 months. but also coming back to like the whole relationship thing, there comes a time, at least in my management style, where there's a level of trust for me, at least in the setting we're in. I mean, every company is different. For instance, like, my son's 4, but when he's right now, I try to give him every little, we'll call it activity, right? Every little tidbit of how to be okay in life and be happiest as possible, and don't eat candy at 6 a.m. and don't eat candy 30 times a day. But then when he's 18, or 16, as long as he's okay and he doesn't have 25 cavities, there's a level of trust. My point being, I don't spend as much time on activity as someone who's hit quota 6 months straight. If they're hitting their quota and they're doing the right things and setting high quality meetings, I say, as Steve said, just be okay. And then I can spend time with someone to make more help. Now, if you start missing your number, one of the easiest things to diagnose in that is the activity. So if you start missing your number, we're going to have that conversation. But yeah, I think it's just, there's a level of trust after those KPIs are firmly hit for at least a 6-month period.
Right. Sure. We've got a couple of minutes left. Can you guys go over by maybe 5 minutes for a couple extra questions, or do you guys need to jet?
I'm good.
Cool. So we'll try to go over for a couple of minutes if people want to stay on. Great question coming from Tom. Tom wants to know, if an SDR is not producing after 3 months, what do you do? Is it time to show them the door? How do you show them the door gracefully? Is 3 months too long to wait? What do you guys think?
I can start this one. In my opinion, 3 months is a good amount, but it truly depends on the SDR and what they're doing. Are they still hitting their daily activity? Are they still a great person to have a part of the culture and team? Are they still being 100% open to coaching? I mean, if some of those things are not happening and starting to kind of fall away, then it may be time to move on. But I think that's a hard question, because to me, it's always just, it was different for each person when it came to that decision to make.
Great. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, it's the right time. I think I agree with what Brian said. We're looking for upward trend. If you're upward trending and you're coming out of it, I'm more likely to say, hey, let's let it roll. If it's flat or descending, I think that's enough in itself to tell you where it's going to go.
Yeah, I would even encourage that before you talk to that person, you need to look at your own process, because you do need to see, well, what are you expecting out of them at 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, looking for that trend. If they're not hitting it, are you addressing it in the 2nd week, the 5th week, the 7th week, the 8th week? Because if you aren't, then, you get 51% of the blame, right? They only get 49%. It's on us, right, as managers. So that's great. This is a great question. I hear this all the time from Randall. Thank you, Randall. What's a good manager to rep ratio when you are building your SDR teams?
I'm curious what you do, Brian, actually, and I'll jump in after. Mine's easy. We do 10 to 1.
You do 10 to 1. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? You're talking about coaching, player coaching, team leads, right? But I would say roughly management to SDR here is close to Steve. It's like 6 or 8 to 1. Well,
6 or 8 to 1 is not the same as 10 to 1. So I won't. But I got to call a little bullshit on you there, Brian. I know you're trying to make Steve look good, but.
No, I would say I did today actually a little bit of a rollout. If it's player coach, it is about 8 to 1. I think if it's more coach to 1, it's probably like 12 to 1 with someone not making any calls at all. Okay. So it is still the average there, Richard.
Yeah, you're right.
It's close, but no, that's fair. I'll take that.
You brought up a really good question too, but I'll just sort of say that I always tell people that you should start at 8 to 1. Because particularly if it's a new manager, if they've had no management experience, 10's too many. I'd even start them at 6. Again, there's this whole, well, can we afford that? We got so many, whatever, right? But, if you overburden someone, you're going to set them up for failure. It's this theory of, well, let's see if they can do it and, throw them to the wolves. Well, that's not how the real world really works, right? Except in our sales minds, right? So I can justify 10 or 12 to 1 if the manager's good. And if on that team, 2 to 3 of them or 4 of them are pretty self-sufficient, right? If it's a brand new team of SDRs and a new manager, any more than 6 or 8, it's going to be tough. You're just not going to have enough time in the day. At least that's been what I've seen and experienced. And that I define that as a best practice. That's not what I'm seeing actually occurring, but based on the failure that I see, that would be my recommendation. So, but Brian, you brought up a great question. The player coach role in an SDR, right? there's actually on Modern Sales Pros, there's this great thread around the player coach role. Some people love it. Some people hate it. I'm a hater of it. I don't like the player coach role. How's that work for you guys?
Works great. And the only thing I would say is that the player oftentimes, depending on again, like everyone's financial situation is a little bit different, but usually the coach will have at least a half a quota. The only reason I say it works great is, like, let's be honest, like there is a level of ego on many SDR teams. And one thing that's really worked well here is to know that your manager can still hack it, still do it.
Right.
There's a value there, right? So we've all, you know what I mean? So when you hear your immediate boss outperforming you, even though he's doing stuff half the time you are, like, it pushes you. It should motivate you in the right way if you have a good team, a good player coach.
Yep.
But Richard, answer your question, it doesn't always work. It really depends on, you're right, you can't overburden someone. So if you try to do someone in a player coach role and it doesn't work out, then be quick enough to fix it.
Yep. How about you, Steve? Do you guys do a player coach role?
Yeah, I'm in I hate it camp. I just, like, I haven't experienced where it works. On that point, though, the manager getting in the trenches, like, our guys will get in the trenches and make dials, like, in the afternoon or do call follow-ups. And so they're engaged on that level. But yeah, I feel like it's a tough role for somebody to blend where they're kind of, playing the two masters, so to speak, their own income or the job of making sure their team is on point and supported.
Yeah, so another, that's really good. And I do think in the player coach role, there's a difference between making them a coach and having them help with interviewing or having them help with onboarding or teaching, right? Like, I absolutely believe that those things are vital. You do want to give that to those senior reps on your team, let them help affect the culture of the team, let them, show some leadership ability, because that is what we're looking for as managers, to look for that next round. So, as I said, I hate the player coach role. Don't think that doesn't mean you can't give people additional responsibilities. I think they should get additional responsibilities.
Yeah, you groom them up.
Absolutely. Good question. So you got this older SDR, right? And they do have a lot of experience. They are, my age of, 29 and a half, and, can talk that C-level person. Because of my experience level, am I worthy of a different salary than a traditional SDR, or do you have to keep everybody aligned based on the SDR comp plan?
We keep it flat. Basically, now you may come in at a higher title, let's say. Mm-hmm. We do pay our senior SDRs higher. But I think once you get into that level, for me, it gets a little squirrely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I would agree.
Same here.
Yeah. I would even say that where you try to make it up is on the overages, because if they're that good, right, if you can build it to overages, then that becomes fair, because they're going to be able to hit those overages better than other people. At least that's the hypothesis, right? So I'd look at it from that perspective. Let's see, what else? Do we have anything else that's, there's like ridiculous amounts of questions. I'm trying to find the ones that, should the SDR manager dial alongside the team? Brian, you absolutely said it. Steve, you said it.
Oh, yeah.
Whether they're a player coach or not, I agree. They need to be making those calls, and they need to be on the phone with those teams. That's coming from David. So David, thanks for the question. How about SDR to AE ratio? That's a good one. What do you see? What's an effective ratio? Brian, yours may be slightly different because you're working for organizations, but I'd love to hear how you guys are doing it. Steve, do you guys have an SDR to AE ratio?
We do. We are super generous with our ratio right now. We're about 1-to-1.
That's great.
Now, understand we're 90% outbound, so a lot of heavy lifting on the SDR part.
No, I think that's great. Brian, does that come up at all, or just based on your experience, what do you think about a ratio?
Yeah, I think 1-to-1 is, if you can get there, is awesome, because you're going to build that relationship between the SDR and AE. The SDR is going to learn about the intricacies of that account executive role much more than if it was 2-to-1 or even 3-to-1. I also think that when it comes to what Steve said about like the metric of the most control of a quality object, that communication on one-on-one, I've also been, I know Steve's team, I used to know Steve's team pretty well, and they have a really great relationship where the AEs and SDRs meet. I felt like almost daily when I was there, Steve, where they talk about the meetings of the last week and which ones were good and why were they bad and how can we change things for the positive. So I think that if you can get to 1-to-1, like, I do think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I would agree. I also tell people to look at it this way: is that your salary of an SDR is about half of that of an AE.
Right.
So you can hire almost 1.5 to 2 SDRs for every AE. So you should be doing that until the AE says, I can't take any more meetings, right? Which at some point they will, and then when you take it away, they're going to be like, wait a minute, don't take away my meetings, right? Like they're going to freak out, but that's a real champagne problem to have. So I totally agree that you want a 1-to-1 ratio if you can afford it, and I always tell people to have more SDRs than AEs anytime. Because that just means you're going to have more meetings,
Right.
and from a cost perspective, it's wiser. What about let's see, what are some of the other ones? What are some of the KPIs you look at your managers of SDRs to focus on? Right, we know what we're focusing: dials and talk time, or number of appointments set, et cetera. Obviously there's a roll up of that to the manager. So there's something different you're asking the manager to focus on at a KPI level to help they're doing a good job. It's a great question.
Yeah, I can go first. We've started to look at the team leads and player coaches on a weekly level. I'm not so concerned about the KPIs, but I think that you should look at your management team and judge your management team and give them KPIs on a weekly level. And here's why. Every time there's a great week, there's an expectation that they'll just do it again. And I've asked people, how are you going to do it again? Like, how are you going to hit that number again? And they go, well, we'll just keep doing what we've been doing. And then oftentimes that breaks. Or if they don't do it, there's this level of like procrastination of a college term paper where it's like, oh, we've got time to fix it up. We've got time to make it up. It's only August 9th, right? I got 31 days in August, or 31 days, yeah. And so when you do it weekly, like there's a sense of urgency, right? Yeah. So rather than a goal of 40, it's like we got to get to 10 a week.
But what are you looking at from them? What KPIs are you looking at the management level?
For us, it's schedules, which is showing like, you're getting yeses and you're active on the phone. That's a close reflection of activity. But that's also, we do completed meetings. So okay. Completed meeting is oftentimes like an accepted meeting from a client. It's pretty similar to Steve's SAL.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Do you measure show up rates? Like, is that when you say an accepted meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you think about that percentage, like the difference between 65 and 70% of a completion rate is huge when you think about across the whole team. So yeah, we do.
How about you, Steve? What do you guys look at as you look at managing your managers?
Yeah, same items. The other thing that we look at is quota participation. We don't want 1 or 2 SDRs on a team of 10 carrying the entire team. So from a management, like, are you pouring into the whole team, or you're getting carried because you got a couple killers? We do weekly meetings to check out like what's the health of your team. And there is some accountability of like, if it's off track, what is your specific plan you're doing to get it back on track? Yep. But participation for sure is a big one.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I'll recommend to folks too, which is one, asking that manager what contributed to the success last week. Mm-hmm. Not why were you successful, right? Why was your team successful? I don't know. What contributed to your success last week at the team level? Mm-hmm. And then asking, can you replicate it, right? And acknowledge, look, we may have gotten some bluebirds, right? Right. That's very possible you get some bluebirds that week. It happens. But asking them what happened and how they're going to replicate it, I think, is going to be one thing. And I think you can reverse it too. Hey, what happened with the team last week? Like asking in my opinion, the manager should be coming to you, telling you what the KPIs that they hit and missed, not you asking if they hit them, right? Like, so some of it's that way, but that's one way I encourage people to do it. I know there's a few more questions, and I'm sorry we're not going to get to all of them because we've gone over by 10 minutes, and we've kept more than 55% of the crowd. So to all of our attendees, thank you so much for attending. And yeah, this was a really, really great one and a fun one. And Steve, thank you so much. For people who don't know what Outreach is, you want to give them tell them what you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So Outreach is a sales engagement platform. We solve 2 of the universal pains in sales. Reps not having enough activity and not creating enough pipeline. And we solved that. We were able to help companies get 30% more opportunities and save their reps 1 to 2 hours a day.
1 to 2 hours a day is huge. I love it. That's 10 hours a week and 40 hours a month. You're getting a extra week per person. Yep. Brian, let people know what InsideSalesTeam.com does. So.
Yeah. So if you're on this webinar, you probably understand that building a sales development team is not easy. And so what we typically do is we help teams grow their sales development team in some way. If it's creating competition with the internal team, if it's certain territories geographically, we're basically just an extension of your team. So we're an outsourced sales development firm in Buffalo, New York.
Great. Also, I know both of these organizations. I've recommended them to people, so I'm very happy to say that one, not only does their shit work, but they're actually good people behind the scenes. So by all means, you can trust them. And I say that from the heart for both of you. With that, I will say happy holidays to everyone. Thank you, Brian and Steve. We really appreciate your time and your extra time. And thanks again to the audience.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.